Hello, welcome back to Premed Office Hours with the medical school headquarters and MAP team. I am your host for the week, Rachel Grubbs. I'm a co-founder here of Med School Headquarters. I've been advising students for 20 years or so. Quick apology if you were logged into a session that started 10 minutes early and then got booted out. Yeah, we had some technical issues. But feel free to ask us that question again. We did unfortunately lose those, and we'll take them. In the meantime, as everyone's getting moved over to the new session, let me introduce my partner in crime, Courtney Lewis.
Hi.
College of Osteopathic. You served as, I think, head of, I forget which committee, at a COMIS before you left academia. You've been just about a year now.
Yeah, I'm coming up on a year. That's been really quick, actually. This will be my first cycle, not as a director. I was part of council. I had a couple elected positions there, so it was good. I miss those, but I'm still able to keep in contact with other deans and directors on the road as we're attending these conferences and staying plugged in, and we're having our own conference, and a lot of them are going to be coming from the MD side and the DO side, so it'll be fun to see them all in October.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about that. We've got MatchCon coming up. One of the things that I keep, they're like, yeah, that sounds great, so I should save the date, right? And I'm like, let's take it a little bit further than saving the date. Yeah. Registration is open, and I strongly recommend that people go ahead and get themselves signed up as soon as possible. We still have an early bird discount for students. We still have plenty of hotel rooms at the special discounted rate. But I think the big thing is planning ahead so you can make the most of your trip. And Courtney, we were just saying, you've been a director of admissions, so you've been to a ton of these conferences, not as a med school admissions advisor at MAP or Med School HQ, but as someone from a med school who's looking to meet prospective students. Talk about that a little bit. What do you think is the real value in a student coming to meet someone like yourself who is, working at a medical school?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it now, it's kind of post-COVID for the most part, and people want to get back to in-person. I know people are still worried about not having the opportunity to actually see people in person, connect with them, see their soft skills, have a conversation. A lot of interviews, I was looking yesterday on the MSAR, are still going to be virtual. So you may not have other opportunities to actually be with somebody in person from the school, a representative, unless you attend one of these conferences, and they make a big difference. I've admitted people that I met at conferences. I was able to follow up on their applications. It made a huge impact. Just by being able to have some eye contact, have a conversation, interact a little bit. There's still a ton of value in that. And I know the faculty want it, the deans want it, admissions certainly wants it. That's why we pay so much money to go and attend those things, because we're trying to connect you. So the desire is there. We just need the people. So we need the pre-meds there. We need you to come and be engaged, to ask us questions, to have us tell you about the school. That's the big thing. So I know the convenience of virtual is great, but you're not interacting on the same level. You're not advocating for yourself in the same way. It's not the same as in person. And I really encourage you guys to get back to attending pre-health conferences in person. I know that there can be some hang-up. I know earlier on we were talking as our collective in a meeting on it can be challenging to want to go to a healthcare, especially if you're going alone and people are ready to kind of jump at you from the tables. You're not sure what to ask and things like that. So if you guys have concerns or questions like that about actually coming to MapCon that are kind of hanging you up, reach out to us. We are happy to answer those questions. We could do workshops, whatever it is, to have you feel really comfortable, confident, plugged in, and taking advantage of all of the resources. We are doing a hyper-tailored conference to try to give you as much high yield information and opportunities and workshops and trainings that you need, because a lot of that was taken away during the pandemic. So just let us know what you need, what the struggles are. We could talk through them, absolutely. But it's the best way to advocate for yourself is to go in person, have a conversation with a rep directly from the school in a sea of thousands of applications and virtual things where they're just giving you a PowerPoint. It's a big difference in interactions. That's my soapbox. That's how I feel about it. Because, all of the med schools are still traveling around to attend these health conferences, hoping that you're going to go, hoping to connect to you guys as students. And if nobody's attending, it's a real missed opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, and since today is pre-med office hours, we're mostly talking about med schools, but it's not just med schools. This is a pre-med and pre-health conference. So we are going to have lots of representation from MD and DO schools, but we'll have podiatry, dent, pharmacy, people who are interested in postbacks. We're going to have some postback programs there. Like Courtney said, this is a chance to meet the people who are reading your applications and deciding whether or not you qualify for an interview. This is a chance to connect. So really look forward to seeing lots and lots of you in person in Baltimore. And we'll help you get ready. We'll make sure you feel prepared and ready and know how to make the most of those sessions. Looks like some questions have come in, so let's start digging into other pre-med questions. May or may not be about how to do the best at a conference. Let's see what we've got.
Okay.
Nora says, how in depth should I go about a misconduct? Detailed explanation with follow-up about how I changed my behavior, or a simple explanation? First of all, Nora, I love this question. Misconduct can be an issue, but it doesn't have to completely derail your experience. So I love that you're thinking about the best way to go about it. I love that you feel comfortable talking about it publicly, because this happens to a lot of people and it is a very common question. Courtney, what do you think here?
Generally, the thing that I would hear faculty say over and over and over with these types of disclosures is they want to see somebody take full ownership. This was your choice. Doesn't matter if you were hanging out maybe with the wrong crowd or anything like that. You made a choice. And then what ways that you've learned and grown since that time, right? Putting some distance in between it. So full ownership and what you've gained after it, so that they know it's no longer going to be an issue. It's not going to be a repeating thing. But you do want to disclose it. Don't try to skirt around it. Don't try to push it off and blame somebody else for it. Like Rachel said, this doesn't have to be an end of the road, but you do want to be fairly detailed, not necessarily in the actual sanction itself, but in kind of the takeaways from it.
Yep. Great. Let's move on. Mir and Mike. Hi, thank you for these advising sessions. Well, you are welcome. I was wondering if someone can apply to an MD or DO/PhD with non-medical research. It depends.
Yeah.
So, Mir, here's what you kind of have to think about. What's the MD or DO/PhD program you're applying to? There are some programs out there that are often referred to as medical scientist training programs. They're often funded by the NIH, the National Institutes for Health, and they are very dedicated programs that are very much about training medical scientists with an assumption of you having wet lab research experience, because that's the specific kind of research you're going to be doing. There are also programs out there where the MD and PhD is more of just a dual degree as opposed to one cohesive program. I don't know if this is still the case. I'm a little out of date on their MD PhD program, but for example, when I used to work very close to Ohio State, many of the MD PhDs I knew there came from a diverse background. There was MD philosophy PhD, there was MD anthropology PhD. And so what I would say is it's probably a good idea to have some research that is related to your target PhD. as well as potentially some more traditional medical or science research. One of the big things we've talked about is that research is not always required for all med schools, but it is certainly a very important component of an MD or DO PhD program. So I think that's kind of what you have to think about is what are your interests? What kind of PhD are you pursuing? And then it wouldn't make sense in my mind to have nothing but quantitative analysis or statistical analysis or interview questioning kind of research if you're planning to do hard sciences research later in life. Yep. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I would argue the case of, well, why do it through an MD or DO degree? Like, why do you need that? Why can't you just do a regular PhD? What's the purpose? Like, what are your drivers? What are your motivations, especially if you don't have any prior experience with medical research? So you may be able to answer those questions, but that's what they're going to want to know.
Right. And keep in mind, lots of physicians do research later on without having pursued the advanced degree, or they pursue an advanced degree years later. You don't have to do it all at once. You can, but this isn't your one shot. Lots of chances to do research. Fran says, can I take my English classes and my stats at a community college? How do med schools look at this? What do you think?
So for this one, I would actually do a little bit of manual research because either on the MSAR or ChooseDO, they're going to have this information. Usually community colleges are okay for prereqs. Double check though. It will state very clearly if they will accept that or not. Usually it's online that they kind of want you to steer away from, but sometimes it may be community college. They may say it must be taken at a 4-year institution since stats and English are counted as prereqs on the MD side. Just double check how they look at this. I think they understand that a lot of the times, like if you're going in the California school system, sometimes you don't go straight into UCLA, right? Or USC. Sometimes you do 2 years at a community college and then you transfer in. So it really just depends. Maybe you're taking these during the summer, you're living in Michigan, that's the time that you can take them. Probably not problematic for these courses, but again, do your research.
Definitely.
There are ways to find that information for sure, to double check.
Yeah, agree with all that. The only other thing I'll add, Fran, is don't sleep on those classes. You didn't indicate you were, but just while we're on that topic, one of the things I see kind of people say sometimes or assume is like, well, it's really only BC at PM where they care about whether or not it was at a 4-year or whether or not it was online. That's not necessarily the case. And your English and stats classes are going to make you a better reader and critical thinker. It's going to be very important for success on the MCAT. It's going to be important for success throughout your residency. So just remember, a lot of pre-meds or pre-health students will sort of let their critical thinking, problem solving, critical reading skills sort of plateau because they're so focused on their science skills. And this is just, I'm always going to take every opportunity to remind everybody that the MCAT is 40% content and 60% reading and problem solving. So, you know, your scientific inquiry skills that you're going to get from stats, your critical reading, whether you do them at community or 4-year, make sure you're thinking about the fact that this isn't just a course where you want an A. This is a course where you're trying to build skills you're going to need again. And good luck. Ian says, I have a letter writer who told me that they would write me a letter of rec, but it is now past when they said they would submit it and won't respond to my emails. What should I do? All right, Ian, I'm going to use an analogy for you here. If this wasn't a letter of rec writer, if this was someone who was supposed to be your friend or supposed to be someone who was going on a date with you and they ghosted you, what would you do? You would probably just move on, right? I do think it's okay to assume a letter writer didn't get an email. I wouldn't passive aggressively say, as I said in my last 2 emails.
Right.
Haven't tried calling, texting, very light professional stalking on LinkedIn. Don't go for Facebook or Instagram, but LinkedIn's okay. That's what it's there for. I think it's okay to try those things because you don't want to assume they're ignoring my emails when maybe they never saw your emails. But if you've tried emails and other forms of communication, just take the hint, right? And maybe they didn't mean it as a hint, but you don't want to chase someone who's not excited about writing you a letter. You want someone who is pumped about writing you a very strong letter.
Yeah. A lot of the times, unfortunately, letter writers are late. You know, they have either a lot of people that they're writing for, it's just something else. You know, it could be something that's just not at the top of mind, so you do have to remind them. But I agree, if it's repeated attempts to contact and they are now no longer responding, which is not the case ahead of time, I agree, that's a hint. And since these are confidential, if you no longer feel confident about the type of content that they are going to write in your letter of recommendation, it's probably best to start considering other options if available. Yeah.
And sorry, so frustrating. You do still have time, but it's starting to get close, right? You don't have to have your letter of rec in when you submit your primary, but you do want them in to be considered. So if your secondaries are in, if this is a Comus or Texas, it's time. It's getting to be time. And if it's
Oh, Rachel, we can't hear you. Do you want me to read it?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
All right. Yeah, I think I need to go get my headphones. I'll do that in just a sec.
Okay.
Hey, does AMCAS include remedial classes like the class before college algebra that is not college level in your GPA calculation? Yes, it does. Every attempted course, even if it was withdrawn, whether or not it shows up on your transcript, because there are some attempted courses that don't actually end up on your transcript, has to be listed for AMCAS. And they use a national clearinghouse to cross-reference. So anything you've taken at any institution that offers an associate's or a bachelor's or higher has to be listed. Even if it's remedial, even if you retook it later and your school does grade forgiveness, AMCAS wants to see all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Denise, hello, I'm a non-trad and prereqs over a decade old with a master's in bio that's 5 years old. My BCPM is pretty low and I need to retake classes. Do you suggest a postback or another master's? Courtney, I'm going to let you take this while I go find better sound.
Sure. So what you are going to want to do, either one could technically work. If your prereqs are that old, you may find more success doing a postback that is tailored to kind of these prereq courses and retaking them and going over foundational content versus another master's, as you said, another master's that may be graduate level coursework, but not going to be foundation building in the same way. So I think a postback would probably be your best bet. You can do it yourself, or you can find one that is more suited to kind of building it out. I think what you're going to want to do as much as you can is take simultaneous courses to show that you can handle multiple science courses at once, because if you're feeling like your chemistry and your bio and everything like that are a little bit lower, they may be a bit worried about you being able to handle multiple science courses at once. So I think a structured postback that focuses on foundational coursework would probably be your best bet if you can find one that works for you like that.
Yeah. How's my audio, friends?
Yeah, it's good.
Much better. Okay. Yeah, Denise, I agree with everything she said. And I would also just add on, if you can do structured, that's great. Those tend to be expensive. If it needs to be DIY, I personally am still a proponent of that. But you just may want to look at some of the structured postbacks to get an idea of what kind of courses to take, right?
Yep.
Sounds like in your case, there may be some prereqs you're retaking, but then you also may be taking some upper level biology. And it is perfectly fine to build your own. You just want to make sure that you're staying focused on things that are considered pure science, right? Because there are a lot of science adjacent courses that just don't qualify for that specific GPA calculation.
Yeah. Can be done.
Good luck. Aaliyah, should we write activities in the same showy visual writing style? So I'm assuming, Aaliyah, that you mean as the same showy as a personal statement. So there's a kind of complex answer to this. Yes, I believe you should show, not tell for both personal and activities essays. That said, and maybe I'm nitpicking over semantics, I don't know that I would say showy, and I don't know that I would say visual writing style. There's a lot of contention around this narrative that we have here at Med School HQ that we think that storytelling is powerful. The important thing to understand is that we think stories are a great way to connect with the reader and express your intent. But the intent of personal statement is why medicine. The intent of activities is who are you? How do you spend your time? So when you say showy visual writing, and again, this could be semantics, but I worry that maybe you're pushing for a little bit too much of creative writing. These are not creative writing essays. They are personal essays. And we just find that often the truth is more powerfully conveyed in specifics, right? So for example, I could say to you, this is an example I use in academy all the time. It's slightly flippant, but I could tell you, hey, I really dig dating nerds, right? I love me a good nerd, right? Or I could tell you that my college boyfriend was a math, physics, and cognitive science triple major who occasionally, when he got stressed out, did this on his head because we didn't know about autism spectrum back then. We didn't know. It's like either way, I'm conveying the same point, but one you may not remember. And the second one, just by that quick example, right? I didn't even really tell you a story. I just gave you some details that help you visualize and remember. And so I do think that's a very powerful way to do activities as well as personal statement, is to use some specifics to help the reader connect and picture what it is you're doing. But you always want to bring it back to why, right? If you're using those examples, if you're using those short stories, those anecdotes, you're then still leaving space in your essay for reflection. Why are you choosing to share the story or example? If it's personal statement, how does it tie back to why medicine? If it's an activity, what was the meaning of the activity? What was the impact? Yeah. Great question. This is an important topic.
When we say showy, it doesn't mean it was a cold, dark night and the lights went out and the sirens were blaring or anything like that. But if instead of saying, I am a compassionate person, you can show me how you behaved compassionately, it gives me an anchor point, right? That's what we're looking for.
Yep.
Anchor points, reflections, what's the takeaway?
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. You could say I'm a compassionate person, or you can say, when I spoke to the 4-year-old, I knelt down to be at their height.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yeah, that's
a challenging time, right? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. The second one, you don't have to tell me you're compassionate. I know you are because you thought about how weird it is to have an adult tower over you when you're a munchkin. Yeah. Right? Like people are always forgetting that little kids are humans too, right? Mm-hmm. That's just one example, right? But so that's what we mean when we talk about show.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Elu Malik. Is there any recommended credits I should take as a career change or postback? I know the basic requirements might just be like 24 credits for me. Well, it's going to depend on what you've already taken. You said career changer. So presumably you have not taken much science. So yeah, you're going to start with your basics, right? Your year of bio, your year of gen chem, your year of organic chem, at least a semester of biochem. You probably need stats if you didn't take it in college. And then beyond that, it's any upper level biologies that are going to help you do better in med school and also help you show that you're ready for the rigor of med school. So these are courses like some med schools like to see second semester of biochem, often rarely required. but sometimes recommended. It might be genetics. It might be immunology. It might be anatomy and physio. Things that are going to get you even more prepared for med school are a great way to not only prep for med school, but show that you can handle that kind of rigor.
Yeah. Doing the bare minimum, sometimes it works, but they are looking, I mean, that coursework hits fast, right? And so if you're only getting the bare minimum under your belt and then they stick you in 36 credit hours of heavy science coursework, it's going to be really challenging. And so the stronger you could build that foundation and have that content under your belt where you actually understand it, you're grasping it, it's fresh, it'll probably help. Because the goal, I used to say this a lot, I haven't thought about it for a while. The goal shouldn't be to just get into med school, to get through med school, right? It's not just getting in, because once you get in, that's when the real work starts. So be as prepared as you are able before you try to take this next step, because once it starts, it doesn't stop unless, you know, you're not prepared or, you know, some negative things happen. So
yeah, such a wonderful point. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most common things I hear when med students talk about med school is the phrase fire hose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a fire hose of information.
Just
yeah.
Right. And so biochemistry at the collegiate level is typically 15 weeks. Biochemistry at many med schools is 2 weeks. And it's more in depth in the college course.
Yeah. So, I would see slides for microbiology, 214 PowerPoint slides long, right? Yeah. And you have to know that content, and you don't get a lot of time. It's a year condensed down into a 4 to 6 week time period in a didactic. And that's just one topic of the many, plus clinical skills on top of it, plus the other stuff, and your own mental, physical, spiritual well-being, right? Like it's a lot. So 24 minimum credit hours, may they give you like a pass, like, yes, you've done it, but if you can have more and a stronger foundation, opt for that.
Yep. And good luck. It's a good question.
Yep.
Aimbot.
Yeah.
I assume you're a real human, not a bot. Is it possible to come back from a low science GPA in freshman and sophomore year? Heck yeah, it absolutely is.
That's a quick and easy answer. Yep, it is. It happens a lot. People take some time to adjust to college sometimes. And as long as I'm not having indicators, like you're not yo-yoing, right? I'm not having dips and dives. It's a trajectory upward, and I can know that you're coming to me as a stronger student than you were freshman, sophomore year. Generally, it's not a problem. It is harder to move the GPA calculator the more credits you have under your belt, but past that, no, it's not going to be something necessarily that's going to keep you out. You can definitely recover from that.
Yeah, totally agree. This is a good time for us to remind you guys about Mapped. So Mapped is our free pre-med, pre-health tracking software. It does many things, but one of its most popular tools is the GPA calculator. So important to understand that med schools do not calculate GPA exactly the same as your undergraduate institutions. There are different rules. There's no grade replacement, for example. A pluses only count as A's. There's a lot of nuances that vary, not just between med schools and undergrads, but also depending on the med school application service. So is it MD, is it DO, is it Texas? There's slightly different rules for each one. We'll calculate all of that for you, and we'll help you analyze your trends. So Aimbot, in your case, like Courtney was saying, it's possible that your cumulative is never going to be amazing. But if you can give us 60 solid credits in the next 2 years of bio, chem, physics, math courses, so your pure science GPA, where you're consistently above a 3.5, as many A's as possible, then they're going to understand that you're a different student today than you were your first 2 years. And the mapped trend analysis is there to help you quantify it, because there's often this sense of like, well, how will they judge me? Like, they're looking at the numbers. So let's look at the numbers together.
Yep. And be strategic, right? Work with an advisor on when you take certain courses, because some are very test heavy, content heavy. You know, you're going to need to go into office hours or take a supplemental course with it. Some have labs. And so, you know, even if it stretches it out an extra semester, it may be worth it, right? So get some advice, get some help, be thoughtful about planning it to meet your needs. And yeah, you can recover.
Yeah. And we've got a code there at the bottom. All MAP starts with a free trial of Pro for 14 days. You can use this code at the bottom, 30 days free, if you would like a longer trial. Part of why I always recommend the trial, MAP is great. 99% of MAP is free, but the Pro level includes chatting with advisors like Courtney and myself, or Enneagram, Ryan Gray, Dr. Wright. So if you take advantage of that free trial, enter all your courses, enter all your activities, message us while you're still on the free trial and ask for some feedback. So now, instead of answering your question theoretically, we can look at your GPA with you and do some analysis with you. Let's move on. All right. Chi says, I've checked my application 5 times now, but I've been very anxious sending my application. Is it normal to be this stressed and anxious? Yes,
Sure.
It sure is.
Sure.
You're saying the quiet part out loud, friend. Everybody's freaked.
I love that you have checked it 5 times. Good.
Okay.
I hope you caught stuff. I hope you caught typos. You know, download a PDF version before you hit submit, see how things are entered. If it looks any different from, you know, the form tab that you're entering it in versus what's showing up on the PDF, just to make sure that content is right. Look for typos, make sure that your dates or things like that aren't messed up. At some point, you will have to say, okay, I'm going to send, but I love that you've checked it 5 times. That's great. That shows me that you're trying to put your best foot forward and you're not just slinging it in, because that does make a difference.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I have seen some doozies.
Yep. But yeah, if you've checked it 5 times and the last time or 2 you haven't found any new errors, you're good.
It's ready.
And you want to move on. You want to start pre-writing secondary so that you're in good shape when AMCAS starts transmitting those in another 3 weeks. All right, let's move on. Jim Tanner, for BSMD applicants, should I write my personal statement and activities the same way it should be on the AMCAS? That's going to depend, Jim, depending on the application. In my experience, most BSMD applicants are not using AMCAS. They're using the college application tool.
Yeah. A lot of these things are kind of independent, and they may have different prompts, different requirements, different character counts. They may want to see a resume instead, because you're kind of early on in your pursuit or your journey. I think that you need to be as professional as you can be. Don't use the word like a bunch or things like that, because, you know, I set up a number of these pathways that we're working with undergraduate students and things like that. And it's a bit of a gamble, right? We're telling somebody coming in freshman year, we're going to hold a seat for you in 4 years, provided you meet these requirements, but we're going to help you along the way, hoping that you make it, right? And so it can be a good opportunity. Just make sure that they provide mentorship and that they're going to help you along the way, that there's the structure and the resources that are needed. But unless we see the application and see the prompts and stuff like that, all we can say that goes in tandem is it's probably going to be, why do you want to pursue medicine, which is probably a similar prompt. And we'd have to know the character count and what they're looking for.
Yeah. And yeah, Jim, you know, this was sort of a broad question. If you meant the same way it should be, you know, I don't know if you meant same essays or if you meant same style. So if you're asking more about style, yeah, here at Med School HQ and MAP, we are big believers in using examples, anecdotes, short stories. but always, always connecting back to the reader, explaining why you're sharing that story, how it's relevant to your message.
Yep.
What else we got? Fran says, what are the best ways to find clinical hours? And can you define and give examples? Oh, is it?
Where's Verinia?
I know. Okay,
We're
Fran, I'll
missing her.
take this one since Verinia is not here. So first of all, clinical is also known as patient care experience. That's what it's called in the pre-physician assistant world. And I really like that phrase, even though we tend to say clinical experience in the med world. I like patient care experience because to me, it more clearly describes the goal. Clinical is anything where you are working directly with patients, directly related to their health. It is not contingent on location. It is not contingent on job title. And that's why it can be sometimes hard to define, or someone will say like, well, is this clinical? It can vary. So for example, someone says, I volunteer in a hospital. Is that clinical? Well, I don't know. Are you volunteering in the gift shop? That's not clinical. Are you volunteering at the front desk? That's not clinical. Are you volunteering in the ER? Still might not be clinical, because what are you doing in the ER? Are you going around with a clipboard taking insurance information? Not clinical. Or are you bringing blankets and food and taking vitals? And, like, it's going to depend on the action. If you're looking for some examples, I would say one of the clinicals that I think a lot of people sleep on that I personally love is volunteering for hospice. That's something that is desperately needed. Even though we are through years post sort of the big advent of COVID, there are still a lot of places that are limiting the number of volunteers they'll accept. So right now it can actually be easier sometimes to find a paid clinical job than it is to find a volunteer clinical opportunity. But one place that still needs lots of volunteers generally is hospice. So don't just look at your local hospital. Look at your local urgent cares, your private practices. Are there free clinics? Are there senior homes? Are there camps that are for children with disabilities or neurodivergence? Are there first aid jobs out there? Like, there's a lot of different ways. EMT work, a lot of different ways to get clinical. And you just need to, the way you would any job, whether you're doing this paid or volunteer, just go do a whole bunch of research, check the places around you, ask your schools, look on job aggregators like Indeed.com. You just need to really pound the pavement. Kelvin, if I took undergrad in a foreign university in biology and I did a postback program in the US, do my credits for my foreign institution count towards my admission, or only my US credits?
Typical answer, it depends. Some schools will accept a foreign translated, like if you send it through WES, it'll do a foreign, or WES for those of you who are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. It will do a foreign transcript evaluation where it will count your credits, look at the coursework, and tell us what it would be equivalent to within the US. So some schools will accept that as a degree for your bachelor's, but they do like to see the prereqs taken within the US. So I'm not sure what postback you did and if it included that. I would say that would be something that you're going to have to look at. As far as your GPA calculations and things of that nature, sometimes it only includes your US credits because those are the ones that have the same kind of credit hours that we can evaluate. That's going to be input. So there's a lot of nuances to this question.
Yeah. And there are a fair number of schools out there that simply want to see at least 90 credits from a US institution, which 90 is roughly a degree.
A degree.
And I'm sorry, because it's the ego that we have about education in a country where we are really struggling to get education right. The hypocrisy just blows me away. So I am not defending this. I'm just telling you this is the reality. You are unfortunately going to have to do a lot of research. The other thing I wonder, Kelvin, and you didn't mention it, but you mentioned doing undergrad in a foreign university, I also see that you spell program in Queen's English, not American English. So I'm just wondering
Canada?
if you, well, yeah, I mean, it could be, I don't know. I'm not supposed to say queen anymore. It's king. Anyway, you use program with 2 M's and an E. And so I'm just wondering if you have residency here or citizenship here, because although you didn't ask, that's a whole other layer you're going to need to look at. Not all American med schools will accept international applicants. So, so yeah, unfortunately, you're just going to have to do a lot of school by school research.
A lot of manual labor there.
Yeah, good luck. All right. Good question from Malay. I'm interested in doing a DIY postback. How do I know a class would be considered as pure science and will go to my BCPM? So this is one of those things, Malay, where I'm going to teach you how to catch your own fish. I will tell you BCPM stands for biology, chemistry, physics, and math. So if your class is very clearly a biochem, physics, or math class, you're good. Keep in mind that for a COMIS, it's actually BCP, no math, so biochem, physics, if you're applying to DO schools. But both a COMIS and AMCAS, as well as Texas, if you're applying there, have course classification guides. So rather than me starting to try to do from memory, here are all the things that you think might be pure science but aren't, what I'm going to tell you is you need to go Google. I would start with AMCAS since it's the biggest. AMCAS course classification guide. And it's going to give you a big long list of which courses they consider subsets of biology and which courses are considered separate.
It's a really good, easy reference. I used to look at it all the time as a director, as I was trying to analyze what could count towards biology or not, if I needed to try to help somebody find a workaround for a prereq. So good. A COMIS is the same thing. It's going to be course classification.
Yep. So just Google that and then you'll have the whole list. And I would say bookmark it, reference it often. And it doesn't mean you can't take any courses outside of BCPM. You might have good reasons for doing so. Just be aware as you're thinking about how is this impacting my GPA, my all other science GPA versus my sort of pure science GPA. I mean, all those numbers matter. All right. Still got about 15 minutes. What else? For the achievement section of a COMIS, can we just explain the scholarships? Example, the blank was awarded based on academic achievement rather than provide a story for each.
Yeah. Usually, I would say usually it comes with scholarships, right? Like I got the John Smith scholarship. I don't know what that is. I have no context. Like, how did you get it? How many people applied to it? What does it mean? How, so providing some context, if it was something that allowed you to go out and advocate or do something or present a poster or something like that, I would love to have that information and kind of know. So if there is a story, that's why you have that latitude in character count, but don't feel forced to do it. Like I know what the dean's list is, right? Yeah. But some of these could really benefit from having that context and information.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a lot of students miss the chance to show selectivity. So like Courtney said, other than dean's list, assume we know nothing. Don't just say presidential scholarship, because at your school that might be well understood, but if it's something like there are 60,000 students at my undergraduate institution and only 100 people qualify for this scholarship, tell me.
Yeah.
And even if 2,000 people qualify, that's still really selective. So it doesn't have to be the world's biggest or most impressive number, but give me some numbers. Help me understand, what did you have to do to qualify for it? How many people were awarded it? Was this based on your performance in high school? Or was it something you actually got throughout your collegiate experience? Like give me some context on what it is. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a story, but just more, it's a big honor. Take the opportunity to explain to me why it's an honor and the way in which you were honored.
Yep.
Not bragging. You're just stating facts.
Yep.
Is not using all 15 spots on the work and activity section viewed negatively by AdComs? No. Quality over quantity here, Stephanie. I will say personally, if I'm reviewing someone's activity essays and they send me 6 or 8 and they haven't told me, hey, I've made a conscious decision to go low, here's why, I might ask as an advisor.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't have to be bad. I just might say, hey, are these the 6 you have done right now? Or are these your 6, right? Because one thing I sometimes see when they're low is people think they have to be all pre-med. I don't want to see 10 hobbies, but if you have 1 hobby or maybe even 2 hobbies, that's fine. If you got a lot of your leadership experience from being the founder of the water ski club, I'm using that example seriously because one of the best essays I've read all summer was an essay about founding a water ski club at her school, right? And even though it didn't have anything to do with academics or pre-med, through her story, without bragging about herself at all, she showed me she cared about inclusivity. She talked about like recruiting people and making people feel welcome. She showed me leadership, like got all kinds of amazing personality traits out of water ski club. So usually if someone's well under 10, I'm going to at least ask why.
I agree. I would say, within reason, sometimes you just have like a paid job that, obviously people need to survive and it takes up a lot of time. So you have one for shadowing and you have lists there and you have, a couple of very long jobs where you have multiple years in it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That lets me know if you're getting a letter of recommendation, they actually know you, that you've put in time there, maybe that you've moved around within the same institution. That's not super problematic. But if it's just low and there's not much depth there, it may just kind of be like, oh, maybe they need another year of baking. So within reason, yes.
Yep. Daniel says, I'm curious how AdComs typically pick candidates for early interviews. Is it based slowly on stats? Right. I am going to kick this to our director of admissions who's here today, but what I want to start with, Daniel, is 213 med schools. Leadership is changing a little bit every year. Committees are refining and improving and experimenting with systems every year. So there is not one block answer that's going to encompass every school.
Yep.
That's it. Courtney, take a pass here.
Sure. I mean, I don't have too much else to add. I would say a lot of the times they're going to look at mission fit. They're going to look at regional location and things like that. They may want people from their state that they're matriculating there, and it's kind of like, this is an easy yes, let's move on for this. So there are a number of factors that could be part of it. Sometimes that information is published, for early interviews or early decision, you need to have these markers, and this is kind of what we're looking for you to qualify in this category. So just, do your research, look at those things, but generally it's not just MCAT and GPA. It's going to have a number of other factors that come into play.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, early interviews tend to be the best of the best, right? So it's going to be people who hit all the notes. And if this were solely on stats, then it wouldn't take a year to do it, right? Yeah. It would just be everybody applies, goes into a rubric, spits out the top 200. But yeah, Daniel, I mean, I think this question was well-intentioned, but what I want to help you remember is don't attempt to play a game when you are not in control of the rules, right? Like, I wouldn't try to angle. What you want to do is submit the best application you can as early as you can. Presumably, you've already submitted your primary, or you will soon, and then get everything else complete. Finish up the letters of rec, your SJTs, get your secondaries pre-written, double check them against the actual prompts, because every once in a while, even though we have an up-to-date repository of secondary apps at secondaryapps.com, they can't change year to year. Mostly they don't, but sometimes they do. It's, the people who are going to have, the only thing I can say with certainty is the people who are going to have the best chance for early interviews are people with complete and awesome applications early on.
Yeah. So you have to be complete. You have to hit those marks before we're even able to move you forward. So, yep.
Bianca, hello. I'm a non-traditional student with a physical disability, and I worry that schools will look at me differently because I use an aid to help me walk, aka a cane. Is this something I should worry about? Well, here's what I'm going to start by saying, Bianca. I can't tell you whether or not you want to worry because you're in your own head. It would be illegal for them to judge you differently based on your disability. So I would love to say, no, it's never going to happen, not a chance. And I think that most people in admissions have great intentions and understand the law, and I think a lot of people in admissions are working really hard right now to unpack implicit biases that maybe they don't even carry. But you have no obligation to disclose your disability until you've been accepted. And then once you've been accepted, you may need to reach out to the Student Resources Office to talk about, if there are going to be any, staircases you need to avoid or any other, challenges with parking, those kinds of accommodations you may need, but they do not need to know. And given that, I think we saw a statistic that said something like only 17 schools are going to do live interviews this year. Everyone else plans to do virtual again.
At least on the AAMC side, it looked pretty sparse.
Yeah. So they may not even know. I was just at a conference last week and I met a couple different people who used canes, and I never realized because I've only ever known them over Zoom. It didn't change how I felt about them at all, but I went, oh yeah, now I see what you look like when you're ambulatory, and I just had never seen it before. So they may not know.
Yeah, it is illegal. It is a protected status, race, ethnicity, age, disability. They all fall under that protected category. It should not be a decision maker factor at all. In your case, they are required to provide reasonable accommodations. They will list out what those are. What I would suggest doing is taking a look at what's called the minimal technical standards. Mm-hmm. Those will kind of let you know, at least from an osteopathic side, there may be a similar one, or maybe it's universal, but there may be a similar one for AAMC, but it's going to be a minimal technical standard of some sort. They will have it published on their site and accessible, where you can look at it and just make sure that you are able to do the tasks that will be required, because you will be asked to sign something like that, but ahead of matriculation. And this will be so that they know if any accommodations do kind of need to be made. Another place to check if you're looking for schools that will be a bit more inclusive is the student handbook. Those are published. What a great resource those are for just about anything you want to learn about a med school, not just disabilities and resources, but also curriculum, repeating courses, interventions, stuff like that. Like, I suggest everybody go and dig through student handbooks, but that would be an excellent resource to find how student affairs works and provides those accommodations, what they view as reasonable, things like that. So student handbooks, minimal technical standards of some sort, those are your two good research platforms.
Yeah. Got time probably for one more if it's short. Okay. Which just means Courtney and I have to be short. The question can be whatever. Yeah, all right, Casey, you're last today. Will med schools be upset if I get my MCAT score and then take like 2 gap years after to pursue other things before med school? Okay, so again, I want to caution any of you when you ask me for these like blanket responses, it's always going to be, it depends. My biggest concern with 2 gap years post MCAT is, one, some schools have MCAT expire after 3 years, so you're cutting it awfully fine. Some do 4, still kind of fine. The other thing would just be, what are those gap years about, right? So, are you traveling the world for fun? Are you doing it to get extra clinical? I'm okay if you decide, hey, I want to take some fun time for myself before I go to med school. But what I wouldn't want you to see is to blow off clinical completely. So even if you're doing other things, you know, you're pursuing journalism or baseball or I don't know what, I would still want to see you continue to show something that indicates an interest in patient care experience, and also potentially even take a course here or there, because 2 gap years is a long time to get back into school. It's very common. Something like only 1/3 of students now go to med school straight after college, 4 years of college and straight to med school. So 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 gap years, more and more common. But almost everyone who takes gap years says, man, it was really hard to get back into school. So I think you just need to think about what is the purpose of those gap years and how are you going to show continuity of interest. But I don't think it's a red flag.
I felt the same. My mind went immediately to expired MCAT and just making sure coursework isn't stale. Yep. There was one person that wanted their question answered that I feel like we could tackle really.
Yeah, if you want to grab it, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I saw this one too. I'm glad you grabbed it.
Yeah. So this is going to be a challenge. Okay. I was talking to somebody recently at one of the conferences who was an asylee, who has been here for 8 years. She doesn't qualify for permanent residency until the 10-year mark or even potentially citizenship. But she's prepared otherwise. You are not counted as DACA. You are not counted as a permanent resident, unfortunately. So this is going to be a challenge. You'll still be counted as an international student. We went around to all of the tables that were at the conference that had deans and directors of admission and recruiters and things like that, and asked all of them. And there was only one school that I knew that was okay with it, but it was because they were also okay with international students, and they did clarify that's what you will be designated as. So we asked quite a few. So this is going to take some research to find those types of schools. But yeah, it's not DACA and it's not permanent residency.
Yep. And yeah, I'm sorry that you had to flee your home, and I'm glad that you're here, and I hope safer. But yeah, good luck on your journey. Yep. All right, so it's 1 minute to the hour. We'll go ahead and pause there. I want to remind you all again that MappedCon is a pre-med and pre-health conference coming up in October. It's going to be in Baltimore, Maryland. There's a very beautiful area right downtown by the Inner Harbor. It's gorgeous. It's right by Camden Yards, which is where the Orioles play. If they're having a good year, it might be playoff season. So aside from the fact that it's a cool town and a cool time of year to be there, you're going to have a chance to meet people from med schools, pharmacy schools, postback programs, podiatry schools, dental schools. All kinds of pre-health admissions officers are going to be there wanting to meet students. We're going to have all these cool workshops, teach you how to suture, teach you how to take vitals. There's, I think, a stop the bleed, a CPR session. We're going to do a mock MMI. You have an opportunity to sign up for one-on-one advising if you want to do a real live in-person advising session right there on site with Courtney or me or one of the other advisors. It's going to be amazing. I really hope to see a ton of these people who I've met over comments for years. Some of you, I've seen your names and your questions for many years. Would love to meet you in person this fall in Baltimore. See you guys next week.
Bye.